Hey everybody, and welcome back to my secondary channel. I didn't put anything up last week. I just got a little bit busy. So to those of you who care about that kind of thing, I apologize. I hope we get around to it, but it's going to be off and on depending on how life goes. Tomorrow, I'm excited to say I am doing my first real produced video about the Iliad, book one of the Iliad, on my main channel. So I hope you can check that out. And today, though, I thought it would just be fun to do something a little different and take a look at the first video I ever made. So way back when I was a young whippersnapper in my early 40s, I think I just turned 40, I started an atheist YouTube channel. The reason for that was, well, I started becoming an atheist. I quit believing in God, and I had consumed some atheist YouTube, as many people do in that situation. And my brother revealed to me that he had an atheist YouTube channel. So I started watching that. I wanted to write some stuff for his channel, or I just started writing a story called The Rescue of Han Solo. It was basically a parody of the story of Exodus, told within the Star Wars universe so that, Luke Skywalker is God telling Lando to rescue Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt. But he does that by sending all these weird punishments similar to the ones in Exodus and then commanding Jabba using the Force not to obey him. So it was 1 point spread out over an entire story, I guess. He had an idea to do some version of that on his channel, but things didn't work out. He was just a little busy with life. And so he said, why don't you start your own channel? And he kind of helped me do that. And that's how I got here, I guess. So I started working on that. I did this whole Lego animation thing, animation to use the term lightly, a stop motion animation, I guess. There was very little fluid motion. It was pretty crude, but it was kind of fun. But before I put that up, both he and my wife said, don't just put up these story things randomly, these stop motion animations. Don't just put them up randomly. Nobody's going to know who you are, have any context for anything. So they said, just put something up that introduces yourself and tells a little bit about what the channel's about. And so that's where I came up with the idea for this video. Thumbnail's kind of weird looking. It's a picture of a really old version of my static face character, along with Barack Obama, I think, being a lizard person. We'll get into where that came from here. By the way, this was back when, until you had 100 subscribers, you couldn't make your own thumbnail. I don't know if that's the way it is anymore, but they just would select a piece from your clip and you couldn't upload a thumbnail. I guess why I became an atheist is pretty clear why I chose that topic. It's just introducing who I am as a creator and why I'm here, and I guess how I got to this place. The part one, you'll notice there's a part one in the title. That's a little different. That convention didn't last. So my brother had labeled his videos part one this, part two that, part three this, and so on. And it was like a series. And so that's where I was starting too. My second one, part two, Answers to Prayer, it's unlisted. You can't find that one. And the reason I took it down pretty early in my YouTubing career is that I had put up prayer requests from a prayer board at an old church I used to go to talk about, they would list prayers and then tell about how they got answered. And I use those as illustrations of what people will accept as an answer to prayer. And I realized that even though I didn't name the people, that was kind of an inappropriate thing to do, so I took it down. Result is now I have part one, why I'm an atheist. I started my Rescue Han Solo videos, a couple other silly things. Then I got into remedial Bible lessons. And then finally, part three in the series shows up like half a year later, I think, several videos into this whole thing. And then that's the last part anything one that I did. So I guess this kind of just shows how you learn and grow over time, and your channel never ends up being what you thought it would be. So that said, let's get this thing started, I suppose. So that was my intro, and already this thing is bringing back memories. I guess I used the exact Prophet Azad logo from the very beginning. So I picked a logo. That's the first thing I made in Photoshop or Paint or whatever it was, and I've stuck with it since. Assume whatever you will about my professionalism. I didn't improve on that over time. I guess it became a little iconic, and maybe it worked. I don't know. I think I designed it to be a little Star Wars-ish themed, and I don't know what I was going for. The thing kind of goes down and bounces like a screensaver. I think I had in mind for it to kind of like swoop in or something, and I was not ready for that effect and did not make it happen. So here's what it is. One thing you may have noticed is that there was a little flash when the song makes its little swooshing noise. And I put up a series of images of different atheists. Let's look at who those were, because this this moment in time in my video did not age super well. We have Neil deGrasse Tyson, I guess fine. Bill Maher, yeah. Lawrence Krauss, he had allegations against him. I think maybe they're confirmed, I'm not sure, but, Sam Harris, who has had his issues. Christopher Hitchens, who, a little harsh and abrasive, but I don't think he went down any super bad path. We have the guys mostly cut off as Daniel Dennett. Then we have Richard Dawkins and Ricky Gervais, who, have become problematic in many ways, largely related to transphobia. So what can I say about this? This was back in the day. I don't think these guys had all their same issues. There probably were some warning signs. Even now, if I'd lived back at that time, I don't think I would have liked a lot of the ways that they presented themselves. They were unnecessarily abrasive. But, when you're getting started, you just look to the famous people and see them as icons of the new thing you're getting into. I think there was maybe something aspirational about that. But I didn't put together this collection of people behind this. I'd gotten this from someone else. I think it was from a channel called Atheism is Unstoppable, which I believe is not aged well either. But that's what that is. It's an interesting look back to when I don't know if revered is the word for it, but I don't know. I looked up to these people and just thought they were all pretty cool, at least cool enough that, just flashing their faces behind my logo at the beginning of the video would, I don't know, be just a little flash in the pan signifier of atheism. Whatever. Let's keep watching. Ooh, and this was a lot of titling. I don't think that was necessary. I'm cutting it a lot, but boy, watching this after a while, it really brings me back to how amateur I was in the beginning. All right.
My son recently asked me how I know that people don't just disappear whenever they walk into another room. At first I kind of laughed it off, but then he surprised me by persisting, by arguing that it's reasonable to say that they do disappear, and instructed me that once a person closes the door behind him, I have no way of observing anything in the other room, and that, by implication, I can't prove one way or the other that the person continues to exist instead of vanishing into thin air until he opens the door again. In the complete absence of information about what the other room looks like, isn't his truth claim that a person disappears just as valid as my truth claim that the person still exists?
All right, so looking back, I think we pretty much know where this is going. Back at the time, I probably thought this was more insightful than it was, just because I'm so new to this whole thing and just so new to analyzing or introspecting about the idea of faith and where I'd come from as a Christian. But this is pretty obviously just, it's an illustration based on the unfalsifiable nature of faith and about epistemology and stuff like that. Basically making a supernatural claim based on the fact that you can't prove something one way or the other. So, I think it's a fine point, but it feels a little obvious in hindsight now. It's interesting, not just where I've come, but where the conversation has come. If you watch videos from back then, everyone was kind of wrestling with religion on what felt like a more basic level, and I think we've gotten a little more refined since then. Now, this whole costume getup, let's get into that for a second. So this video is the first one where I put on the static face thing, and there's a story behind basically this whole setup there. I at first was just going to be wearing a hood over my head. I don't know, that looked a little prophetish or whatever. And I wanted to come across as like doing some underground recording in some bunker or something like that, secretly getting the message of atheism out, just to kind of have this, renegade feel to it or whatever. I think that's what the brick wall was all about. And then having the hood, I think, was going to add to that. At first, I wasn't going to have my face covered. I was just going to have a hood, but I struggled with how to deliver. I wasn't at all in a place where I was going to do anything off the cuff or even from an outline. I very much wanted to read a script. And so at first, kind of naively, I thought maybe I could have a hood over, covering my eyes enough to where I could look at a script without everyone seeing that I was reading. That pretty quickly proved to be, just a little impractical or difficult. And so then I started thinking about how to obscure my face. From the beginning, as many show your face coward comments as I've gotten, I was never trying to hide my face. My first trailer video actually showed my face. And so the whole reason I did that was just to obscure my face so I could just read my lines and then go back. And I was miming this. You could tell in this one, the timing isn't as good as it became later. The masking effect, by the way, I'd put a orange ski mask over my head and then tucked it in. That's why I always wear these things with these. I became comfortable with them, but at first I wore them to like tuck the hat in so it wouldn't just be hanging out. So yeah, I just thought for some reason, wouldn't it be funny if I had my face made out of static? And that just became my thing. That is a Carhartt jacket, I think. It's just a work jacket that I used to have. Underneath that is a gray jacket with black above, which I ended up wearing that by itself for a little later. I don't know. Maybe most of you don't care about this, but to me, it brings back a lot of memories. And then I just had some little gloves on. The reason for the gloves is it was maintaining the illusion, I think, or at least the possibility that I was just purely made out of static. And so I had everything else covered up. Yes, that was a really hot setup to wear there. I was in a basement in a little apartment at that time, and I just literally just pinned up a blue sheet on the kitchen area, and I was just sitting at the kitchen table. I was recording this on my iPhone, and I had just two lamps was what I was lighting up with. This is before I bought studio lights. I just put 2 desktop lamps, and I put coffee filters over them to keep the glare from being too bright. So that was my setup back then. Audio is what it is. It doesn't sound great, and a lot of clicking noises and other mouth noises, which I've always struggled with, but boy, I wasn't aware enough of them back then. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention something. This static-faced Prophet is Odd character, for good reason, has often been compared to Logic and the way that he pre-records his audio and then does the miming thing where he bobs his head. Clearly, I was inspired by that to some extent. I was aware of Logic at this point. I'd watched him before I started doing my own videos, but I don't think that I was specifically trying to imitate him. It feels like more people were doing that kind of thing, or I mistook a lot of people like Armored Skeptic who were doing a cartoon with a voiceover for doing something similar. But I feel like it was more of a generic thing, or at least I perceived it that way. The way I'm doing this now, I started sitting at a table, and then later I would be standing up when I did my videos. This is more modeled after somebody called Grappling Ignorance, who you've never heard about, but he had an atheist channel back in the day, and he would sit here looking very much like this, where he's sitting at a table with a hoodie on, and everything's obscured. He did it with a weird reduced color scheme and everything like that, where you can't see his face. So it's a combination of different things that inspired this type of character and the way I set this up, I guess. But Grappling Ignorance, if you haven't watched him, I think he'd be worth going and checking out. He's pretty cool, even though a lot of you today might not have heard of him.
After pressing me with this line of questioning, he stared at me expectantly, demanding in a playful way that I prove my lack of belief in vanishing people. My response? In short, I told him that we both know that the world as we observe it follows a pattern that suggests people walk into and out of rooms without their existence being interrupted. The most intelligent and useful thing we can infer from this pattern is that people still exist when we can't see them. His claim, on the other hand, runs contrary to everything we have ever observed. It doesn't explain anything we've ever seen or predict anything we're ever likely to see. In light of this, I told him, I shouldn't have to prove that the consistent pattern of reality I've observed my whole life continues to play out when I can't see it. Rather, he should give me good reason to believe that this pattern suddenly and abruptly breaks down when I'm not looking. Now, to be fair, my son understood this. I say none of this is an insult to him, because he's a smart kid who is just being purposefully obtuse for the sake of a little philosophical jousting.
So yeah, I wanted to throw that in there just to make it clear that I was not making fun of my son. He's a very smart, skeptical-minded young man, always has been. And I'm not going to say much about what he believes and doesn't believe and stuff like that. But yeah, this was not to tease him. We always have these kinds of conversations. You might be able to imagine that if you picture how I am on this channel, that my kids and I talk about things and bounce ideas off each other. I don't think my kids like watching me that much for various reasons. But one of them is, who wants to sit there and listen to their dad talk? We've already had a lot of these conversations. They've already accessed me one-on-one and had back and forth about this stuff. Who wants to sit there and listen to their dad recording himself talking for one, but then, why would they want to just hear this when they talk to me all the time? By the way, I guess I wasn't really good at framing images. I had the top of my head cut off. But in fairness, later on, I would poke a little hole in my mask so I could see things a little bit. This one, I was purely blind. I set up my phone. I tried to get it within covering a certain range of area. And then I went down to sit down. I could not see a thing while I'm doing this. And it was a bit of work.
The problem is, however, that some people take this kind of thought process seriously.
What's up, Josh Fierstein here. So I'm here to issue the $100,000 Atheist Challenge to anybody that could provide me proof or evidence that God does not exist. I think it's rather ridiculous that there's been people for a long time that have said that God does not exist, and yet they're unarmed because they have zero evidence and zero proof. How would that ever hold up in a court of law? You see, if we were to look at absolute truth, and we were to look at the totality of all knowledge, all scientific facts, everything, and we were to be able to draw a circle that would represent it, it would look something like this: broad and expansive and large. And yet it is that if you were to draw a circle of everything that you know, every experience, every scientific fact that you've ever learned, whether in school or study, it would probably look something more like this. Now, don't you think it's ironic that there's people that have lived in this little circle their entire life that are trying to claim that there's no God that exists outside of their knowledge? Therefore, because they've never experienced him, he doesn't exist.
Yeah, so Josh Fierstein, he's a blast of the past, isn't he? That video went around a lot. It was a popular punching bag for atheists. I would occasionally see Christians pass his stuff around, and ooh, that was kind of sad. Either that or the one about evolution, where he just talked about how non-scientific it is, whatever. So I guess in a way, this is a little bit of a response video in that I brought him up to respond to him. It's funny that the titling, when I play his clip, says that I cut out a lot of just rambling and gibberish, where that was a long, uninterrupted clip of Fierstein talking. So I guess I didn't have much of a sense of pacing, right? Again, the point's really obvious here, though. I think I'm hitting on something good as far as epistemology goes. And I like the one thing I said earlier, where you need to show me something to engage with, and then we'll take it seriously. I think this is a fine way to just initially give Christians, or maybe someone sitting on the fence, as long as they're open to hearing you, a general idea of why people don't believe in their supernatural claims, or just their religion in general. Clearly, it'll be lost on true believers, but still, it's fine. Thing where I hold up the two little poster boards, that was a weird thing to do for a gag, and I don't know that it really paid off. When I could have just put that on screen, I don't know what I gained by the gag of holding those up. One reason I bring this up is I remember very clearly that was a ton of work. Remember, I can't see a thing in this video when I'm shooting it. So I put those down, I hit record, I go over to my chair, I listen to all the audio, I have to grab them with my gloved hands, not seeing a thing, and then hold them up. And this took me a few tries and was just super tedious. The coloring looks a little better when I'm holding those up. I guess that kept the lights from like oranging my outfit out too much, so I guess that's fine. This little image here, though, has been the banner on my channel for a long time, which just goes to show that I really don't tend to my branding very well. Up until the end, Prophet Azad had this image on there with my logo across it, so take that as you will, I suppose. But yeah, Josh Fierstein, you can imagine that a new atheist is going to be using that as a, standard illustration of why they do or don't believe what they do. You gotta punch at the $100,000 Atheist Challenge, right?
It's pretty clear that these arguments are on nearly identical philosophical ground. But my point is not to ridicule my son, who is only playing around, or to take jabs at Fierstein, who is frankly an increasingly irrelevant buffoon who deserves none of our attention. I bring these two examples up because they very neatly illustrate an important point. Whenever someone draws a boundary around what I can observe, then tries to tell me that something somewhere outside that boundary is vastly different from everything I've ever seen before in my entire life, and argues this on no grounds other than the fact that I can't prove him wrong, then I feel quite justified in dismissing the claim. And it isn't because I'm closed-minded or because I make unfair presuppositions about the world.
So I think this is a fine point. Again, I don't think this is all terrible. It's a little bit basic, but I can see myself start to develop the thinking that got my channel where it was. This is fine stuff about epistemology. I think it's a good connection between what Fierstein said and what my son had said. Nothing super mind-blowing, but it's all right. I do stop after holding up the sign. I guess I wasn't much for subtlety and, just really spell out, there's the connection between these things. I don't think that's really a habit I've ever dropped, though.
Look, Fierstein was right about one thing. I'm just one person, and the amount of knowledge I've obtained is minuscule in light of everything that can be known about the universe. But within that tiny circle, I have, from the time I was born, been observing the world around me, subconsciously noticing patterns and learning about how the universe seems to work. My goal is to gradually let that little circle expand as much as possible over the course of my life. And if I don't use my previous experience to help me filter plausible new ideas from absurd ones, I'll be wasting my time on a series of wild, uninformed guesses that will drastically inhibit my learning.
This is one of the core ideas that I think has driven a lot of my channel and about how I thought of religion and supernatural claims in general. And it's something I've tried to articulate. I don't think it's a super unique insight, but I think it's one that as I've developed, at least my version of it has really helped me flesh out why I don't believe in explaining where religions take shortcuts. It's just this clear equivalency between Christianity and Christian claims and just other paranormal claims in terms of how seriously you should take them. And then addressing the question of why Christianity is different or is perceived as different. It's mostly cultural, and it has more to do with how many people believe in it and how much cultural leverage it has. And that's really more than evidence or anything else is what separates it from like ufology or Bigfoots or things like that, both in terms of how it interacts within society, but then more importantly, how we as atheists react to it. And so, I don't know, most of this I cringe when I watch, but there's little things in here where, along with memories of being a new, very amateur YouTuber, I also see a lot of memories, the little seeds of ideas that I would develop as I go on. So it's kind of fun.
Nothing in my life gives me reason to consider psychics, UFOs, ghosts, fairies, reptilian time travelers, or any of the other 1,000 wild absurdities people might try bringing to my attention.
So I just make that really explicit by giving a bunch of examples. Again, new to all this, I was flashing images across the screen way too fast. Nobody's going to see most of those, except I guess when I paused on the Obama one, being a reptilian. And that's, of course, where I got my thumbnail.
For pretty much all of my life, I've had the critical thinking skills to notice that these phenomena don't manifest themselves in the world as I see it, and to recognize the meticulous way in which people used conspiracy theories and claims of hidden evidence to explain why I never see them. So basically, I could point out the logical flaws in every paranormal fad and in all the other religions in the world. Yet somehow I still kept practicing and defending Christianity. Why? Well, it wasn't because I was an idiot. I just applied my intelligence to the defense of the one little area of stupidity I'd been trained to believe in.
Michael Shermer, I think another one that hasn't aged well. But I had a history with him. I had read some of his works even as a Christian, and I was that one thing where it shows I applied skepticism to all these other ideas, but not Christianity. On a personal level, that was a big thing. I was into skepticism a long time as a Christian, and I know there are different ways of looking at this. The accurate one is just that I had a skeptical mind, and I applied it to everything that I felt safe applying it to, and I made this big exception for Christianity. Christians, or at least ones who might want to look at me accusingly, or at least find an answer other than, he quit believing because he didn't see evidence, they would probably see this as just evidence of a skeptical, and using that word in a pejorative, a skeptical mind who's always looking to explain things away, or, a mean-spirited cynic, basically some kind of attitude problem that manifested in these other things and finally found its way to Christianity. I do like this quote, smart people believe weird things because they're skilled at defending beliefs they arrived at for non-smart reasons. I think that's pretty insightful, and that explains a lot of where I am now, or where I was at that point. Or let me try it a third time, where I was when I was a believer. Now, you can tell where I'm headed here. I'm going to tie it all together and say that some point this clicked. I think that's where I'm getting, if I remember right. Well, let's just watch.
Deep down, I knew Christianity had all the same problems as all the other beliefs out there. To borrow Fierstein's illustration, I recognized that God had never appeared in my little circle of personal experience, and that when Christians claim that he did most of his miracles thousands of years ago, that he answers prayers with yes, no, or maybe in a way that looks like random data, and that he speaks to them only through what appears to be their own thoughts, they were just trying to explain how he's not in here, but they can still believe he's out there. Sure, I saw these inconsistencies, but I struggled to shove my doubts to the back of my mind, to tell myself that, for whatever vague reason I could conjure, the criticisms I leveled against other people's beliefs didn't apply to mine. I tried to give Christianity a pass because I was attached to it, because I grew up with it, and because my community reinforced it. But over time, those doubts festered in the back of my mind, pestering me. I grew more and more distant from my faith, seeing more and more of my fellow Christians as the crazy ones until finally I let it go.
Oh yeah, I did. I went through that. Those are just the crazy ones phase. whether it's King James Onlyists or Pentecostals or whatever. I saw a lot of those issues. Again, some people might think those criticisms were just a prelude to me becoming who I am now, that I just had a bad attitude and that I nitpicked over a lot of other Christians. But that's not what I was doing. I had these doubts. I could not deny them. It wasn't that I was just trying to tend to some kind of nasty, cynical attitude. Those doubts I couldn't stop those doubts. And so this was just looking for an outlet for them. I was always trying to carve out that exception for Christianity. Just like I tried to separate Christianity from all those other paranormal beliefs, I tried to separate true Christianity or some version of Christianity I could hold on to from individual little silly things that, weren't true Christianity or weren't essential to Christianity. I think for an introductory video, this is some pretty good stuff to get across. This is almost like a first deconstruction video or deconversion video, even though I didn't do those official ones until quite a bit later.
Finally, I recognize that, when you take it for what it really is, the idea that an all-powerful disembodied intelligence exists just beyond my realm of observation is just as juvenile as the idea that people disappear as soon as I can't see them. And that's how I became an atheist.
So that's how I became an atheist, or so the video goes. I wouldn't say there's anything false in that. I would say that maybe my journey was not as closely tied to this one epistemological question as you might think by watching the video, but definitely noticing little things like this and then, trying to make those exceptions for a period of time, recognizing how I'm trying to do that, and then realizing both that doesn't hold up and questioning why I'm working so hard to make these exceptions, to not apply the same skepticism to Christianity that I applied to other things. I think that kind of helped to get me there. So that was that first video. I had not watched that at all prior to this. Well, at least in a while. And so this is a little rare. Usually I'll at least watch something ahead of time and outline something. This time I literally just sat down, pushed play, and started talking about whatever I saw. So hopefully it was fun for you. It was a real journey for me looking back all these, 9 years ago. Geez. Yeah, it's been a long time since I started this YouTube journey. It's fun. It's a combination of areas where I definitely had room for improvement, and this feels borderline unwatchable, at least in terms of audio, but maybe that's being more critical of myself than other people would be, or maybe not, but it's fun to look back. Also, a little observation, watching that outro just takes me back. I had gotten that song from Ross Bugden. There's two different versions of it. The one you hear is just a little piano thing that I would use to intro and outro to my videos. There was a more emphatic version, which I've played from time to time, but not very often. And it's just kind of fun. That's a pretty catchy song. It really worked for my channel. I think a lot of branding turned out pretty well for me, even though I'm not a professional at that. I probably was hit or miss with a lot of things. It's a good little earworm and people like it. And I don't know, they've kind of missed it when I started new channels, but I don't want to keep the old thing. And the tune has a little bit of an attitude to it that works more for skeptical response videos than just what I'm doing now, which is a little more lighthearted and stuff. This version sounds a little different than what you're going to hear in other videos. More recent ones have a slightly different version that somebody made for me. And the reason is there's one of them that's a piano one that sounds very similar to this, but has a couple little things that are touches that are different. It's because this song started getting auto-tagged on YouTube by somebody making false copyright claims. They were totally unwarranted. The person who made the song, Ross Bugden, acknowledged that this was a problem, and he would go, if you wrote him, he would go in and basically clear it up for you. And I think he ran out of time to do that because this became such a big problem. So I had to switch from, even though I had every right to do it, I had to switch from that actual recording of his to avoid copyright claims and switch over to another fan-made one. Thank you, by the way, to all the people who have made versions of my songs. It's really cool, and I've used a lot of them over time. Anyway, that was that video. I hope you've enjoyed this journey, and I will see y'all next time. I expect to be doing a live stream next week, so I want to continue this pattern of doing short recorded video and live stream with maybe extra stuff in there, here and there. But I will see you around. Have a good day, everybody, and hope to see you over on my main channel for Iliad Book 1.